welcome to Car and Truck Talk USA. On this edition, it's Tom Burklow, motorcycling across Europe.
Hi, my name's Tom Burklow. Why don't you join Rich and us on this podcast and hear about my trip across Europe by motorcycle and see some of the sights and hear about some of the adventures.
Live.
Hello everyone and welcome to this edition of Car and Truck Talk USA. We've taken quite a hiatus. In fact, this is the first show that's been recorded since March of 2011, and here we are almost on the doorstep of Thanksgiving. My name is Rich Baxter, and I'm joined today with a special guest, Mr. Tom Burklow, a renowned motorcycle safety expert from Ohio, and he's here to join us today in a moment. But first, a little car news for all you guys out there and gals. The end of 2011 is here, and that, of course, signals the car shows are making their way back across America. They usually start out on the West Coast, and we've already seen the Seattle Motor Show take place in the first week of November, and they're slowly making their way across the Midwest and over to the East Coast here by the winter time into 2012. So it's an exciting time for people that like to check out the new cars. And of course, in 2012, there's also the CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, and more it seems like Ford is making a splash into that and just taking the show over with some of their new innovations with some things. This year they're going to be unveiling a product called Evos, which is a concept car and not yet available from Ford, but one that will probably be getting a lot of headlines for sure. So Ford getting ready to announce that. But today on the show, we're going to be talking with Tom Burklow, and Tom's joining us from Ohio today. How you doing, Tom?
Oh, pretty good. Enjoying a little bit of fall weather today, so it's kind of pleasant.
Yes, it is. It started off pretty nice here in the southern New Jersey area. We had some sunshine earlier, but kind of gave way to clouds and your typical type fall day. But Tom, why don't you tell some of the listeners, I know you were on the show before, but tell some of our listeners about your website with motorcycles, and you're a safety expert with motorcycles.
Okay, my background is in the motorcycle industry. I've looked into pursued when I was in college and started a job in a motorcycle dealership at the very, 5 feet below the bottom, actually, I think, and spent about 20 years in that industry. And along that, I came across another BMW motorcycle owner that wanted to do an exchange thing where he loaned his motorcycle to me and I loaned him mine, and struck up a lifelong friendship, and we started a little organization that facilitates that to some degree. Bike share, transatlantic bike share. We kind of just refer to it as bike share now because we're more than just transatlantic. We have people in the southern hemisphere, eastern hemisphere, western hemisphere, and it's just a little thing I do on the side, and it's become a really nice community. Even before Facebook, we were doing things to help people meet each other around the world that had similar interests.
That's really cool. I know with the motorcycle community in general, it's a close-knit type of community. When you pass by on the roads and you see a motorcycle pass one another, usually signaling hello to one another, at least around these parts.
They don't see too many Camry owners waving to each other or Infiniti owners. They just drive by sipping their coffee, I think, so.
That's for sure, and it's a close-knit type of community. I know I've never driven a motorcycle myself, but I've always had that urge to want to. Maybe someday. I'm not too old yet, but as the years go on, I don't want to take the chance because, of course, it's depending on where you live or whatnot, it can be a little dangerous. But your work is in safety as well with motorcycles as well. You're a good advocate of riding the right way.
Yeah, when I was in college, in the catalog, I saw a class for motorcycle safety for 3 credit hours, and I thought, well, I could maybe at least get 1A in my 4 years of college. And so I took a motorcycle safety foundation course, became an instructor. That was back in like 78, and I worked in the on-road program. And then during the 80s, I became very involved in the ATV safety training program as a region manager. And I'm going to guess about 5 or 6 years ago, became a dirt bike school instructor. And these days I'm really focusing more just on the dirt bike school instruction. It gives me an opportunity to work with families and kids that are getting into the program, getting into riding for the first time. And it's a much more fulfilling experience, not dealing with licensing, but people there just trying to try it out for the first time. And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sounds like a whole lot of fun. I know I used to work with a good friend of mine. We actually met at work, and he has never ridden a motorcycle or anything, but probably about 8 years ago now, he got the idea that he wanted to get his license and, give it a try and all. And he got so worked up on his license practice here in New Jersey. They make you take a scooter or a motorcycle itself on a small course to prove your adeptness in handling, and he actually crashed on that test, which was a tough break for him, but I think he did recover and reschedule another test and eventually passed it. But, for the average guy out there or gal that wants to get on a motorcycle, what kind of advice could you give to them to, kind of ease their way into the motorcycle world, so to speak?
Well, I think it's never been easier on so many levels. If you're interested in information, the web, it's the handbook for life in many ways. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of resources out there. I'm not advocating read the web and go ride, but the MSF programs and state motorcycle programs have never been more available than they ever were. When I first started doing this, I think I was the only instructor in the state of Kentucky and then one of few in Ohio. And now, state of Ohio, for $25, they'll provide you with a motorcycle, instruction, professional instruction, classroom time. And when you complete the course, if you complete it successfully, you have your license. And many states are going to this. Now, it may not be $25, but you got to think of it this way. Even if it's $200, $300 to get into a hands-on safety course, you just can't beat that bargain. Plus, it really gives you a lot of insight into what you're getting into, and help you maybe pick the right bike, scooter, start off small for a couple reasons. One, to get used to the machine that you're riding. And the second part is we've all owned cars for a large part of our life, and we know in a heartbeat what we want. But with a motorcycle, it might be a different vehicle, so it gives you a chance to see what matters to you, what doesn't matter to you. Ride for a couple of years. Don't worry about trade-in values. Find what it is you want, and then your next purchase will be much more rewarding. You'll have some miles behind you. You'll have a bike more suited to what you want, and take your time. I mean, they didn't build Rome in a day. That's probably the biggest thing I saw kind of with the rebirth and the interest in Harleys and riding and people that are non-riders getting involved is we're sort of a flip a switch, take a pill, I know how to do it, I'm done society. And motorcycling is something that you take time, you develop your skills, and it's the best homework you're ever going to get. So just patience. Don't be confused by somebody who's done it all their life making it look easy. They started out just like everybody else. So be patient and enjoy the experience.
That's great advice for the novice or the person that's...
Or returning motorcyclists for that matter.
Exactly. As you get older, of course, things change. Your body changes, your reflex changes, and, your response rate changes. So thus you have to relearn certain things, and that's a good point there. It's not only the beginners, the younger people that are coming into motorcycle riding, for example. It could be anybody. So,
well, the returning motorcyclist, I know in some studies I've read in Great Britain, show up just as high in accident situations as the young 20, 21-year-old male rider, which traditionally is always the highest statistic. And a lot of that is your confidence is there, but you're rusty. The other thing is the performance characteristics of the motorcycles these days is extremely higher than it was maybe 15 or 20 years ago when some of the older riders stepped out for a while and are coming back. So I guess that you learned to drive in a Chevette and now you have a Nissan 350. So you got to get your sea legs back and be patient. Remember that you've been away from it for a while, and adults aren't very patient learners.
Exactly. Well, that's some very great advice from you, Tom. And you recently took a trip across Europe with your motorcycle, and that is what led to this show, actually. A fantastic story of you going across Europe, just you and your bike and your Ready Pack, as you call it, and I thought that was pretty unique. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think I can I often get the question, why do I do something like that? And I can almost remember, not the date, but I can remember the place and the day. I was on vacation with the parents, and a guy came by. I'm thinking it was a BMW down the interstate, and all he had was a tank bag, leathers, and a tent. And I thought, I need to do that. It's just a great way to travel, and Europe is just like we talked about earlier, whether it be in a car, train, on foot, backpack, bicycle, motorcycle, it's a great place to experience some other parts of the world. So for me, the motorcycle was the perfect combination to do that. So this is, I'm trying to think, motorcycle trip-wise, I think it's about my 4th trip in Europe. I've been to Scotland, done a couple trips around England, 2 around Europe, and then just a short hop across the channel to just kill a week and see what was going on. This is probably one of my longest in terms of miles, about 3,000 miles.
Wow, that sounds like an awesome adventure. And that adventure started off in England, actually. Your motorbike is over there. Why don't you tell the people about how your trip started in northern England and then it progressed nicely across over to France?
Yeah, I have a bike that stays at a friend's house, a BMW K100 LT. It's one of their earlier or older. It's a 94 model touring bike. And I'm fortunate, and this is kind of an interesting side note from the mechanical aspect. Before I left 2 years ago from my last trip, I'd put a new battery in, topped it off after the ride. A friend of mine used it when he left. He plugged in the battery tender. BMW motorcycles of that generation don't have the best reputation for longevity on batteries. So on the way there, I grabbed a battery on the way from the airport, and I got there and I looked at the battery. It looked pretty good. I put a voltmeter in each cell, and I got good readings. And the bike sat in a non-heated outbuilding for 2 years on a battery tender, and the battery is perfectly healthy. I rode it all summer. So, the whole thing of particularly motorcycle batteries are not forgiving to deep cycling. So thumbs up this winter for the guys. Get you a battery tender of some sort and throw it on your bikes in the garage. So then I have to go through I usually give the bike a check out. It was put away after my friend used it, and have to go get a thing called an MOT, Ministry of Transportation. And in most states here, you're just renewing your license plate, tell them you have insurance, down the road you go for $40. In Great Britain, the Ministry of Transportation has, they're all private. It could be a motorcycle garage, a car garage, and you go there and they have an inspection they go through for tire wear, tire condition, brake condition, fluids, lights, brake lights, tail lights. It's a full-on safety inspection, and it has to pass that first. And then you can go to the local post office. They do a lot of things at the post office there, and give the Queen either a 6-month or 1-month tax payment to pass your MOT and get your tax disc, which has to be placed on the vehicle. And from there, was off to the ferry to cross over to France.
Wow. That you mentioned about the post office over there, and I know I've been to England a few times. It's one of the most useful offices probably in England, the post office. They handle a multitude of different functions over there, from I think unemployment benefits to
milk. If you need some milk, you can get it at the post office, gift cards, you name it.
Yeah, you name it. It's one versatile office over in England. It's kind of unlike our U.S. post office here. I mean, when you go to the United States post office, you're generally just mailing something or you're picking up stamps or something, but I got to hand it to the British. They have a pretty cool aspect with that post office over there. They really get a lot of miles out of that place.
I mean, even for paying bills to private entities and things like that, you can take care of that. I know in some aspects in the rural areas, if the postmaster's coming by in their truck, you can hop a ride with them, just like public transit. So
that's amazing over there. I'm going to ask you a question that I ask people that drive cars over there. Do you ever have a problem driving in England on your motorcycle? Because I know they're sort of the opposite as we drive here, on the opposite lane, so to speak. Do you ever have a difficulty with that at all, or do you have to always keep your wits about you with as far as lanes and things?
Well, just as long as everybody gets out of my way, I do fine. And stay off the sidewalk. You know,
right.
I've driven I've gotten better the last couple of years. Usually I'm driving the car, first couple of downshifts, I reach for the door handle to crank the window down instead of to the left. But I've learned little things. For example, on the motorcycle now, I know that, here I keep the clutch slide next to the center line. There I keep the throttle. Usually where I have trouble, is in a parking lot. There's no real directional control, and you just go on autopilot, putting through the parking lot, and you think, why are these people driving straight at me? Oh, I'm in England.
Exactly. I'm on the wrong lane, maybe.
Or if you get out into the where the bike is stored is in a beautiful area. It's the Yorkshire Moors. It's a very beautiful park area up north of York, and a lot of the roads there are probably lane and a half, high hedgerows, no lane markings. So you're using the lane for your best safety advantage and so on. And then as you come to a turn, you think, okay, I need to get back to my side. Which side is that? So the thing I usually do is the first day out, I don't try and hammer out a lot of miles. I just say, okay, I get as far as I get my head back on the task there. And maybe you noticed this too, to me, a much higher level of expectation of a driver or a motorcyclist to do what they know they're supposed to do. Whether it's move along with the traffic, get out of the way, don't undertake, as they call it, in terms of here we call it passing on the right on the interstate. They'll write you a ticket for that as fast as they'll write you a ticket for anything. So the first day out, I just take it, I'll stop and check the bike a little more often, hydrate myself, and wherever I get that night's where I get.
Well, that's pretty cool. I know I've never driven in England. Every time I've been there, I've been on the public transportation, either trains and things like that. But I got to hand it to a lot of people that get out there on the road. I've been a passenger in cars over there, and I just, things happen such as an opposite that I'm used to here from the States. It just boggles my mind on how people can actually get used to that in a short amount of time.
Well, the thing that helps is if, a lot of times you're already in traffic and you've got a flow in front of you to read from. I find myself when I get, out in the hinterlands, I'm riding by myself, there's no traffic around, or when I come to a T intersection, which they don't have a lot of those like we do here, is that I have to stop and think, okay, when I make my left or my right turn, the sequence of which way you look, right, left, right, is opposite. So I just take my time and I look more often. If the guy behind me beeps the horn, well, it's my vacation, not his. But to make sure that when I go through the intersection, I'm on the correct side of the road. And again, if you got cars coming, it's a good way to say, okay, if they're there, I need to be over here. So it just takes patience, and you can't be in a rush. It's when you realize how many things you do here without thinking, which is not necessarily good. But as car drivers and motorcyclists, you kind of get on autopilot, and you're thinking about work, you're thinking about what you got to do when you get home, and you're not really paying attention. So I find my days much more fatiguing there, just because I'm concentrating more on exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. Exactly.
It's even a bit of a difficulty when you first arrive in England as a tourist. Crossing the street, sometimes you're accustomed to looking left, and you're waiting to see that vehicle moving left towards you. Well, he's coming at you from the right, so if you look left and take a step, probably a lot of people have done that and regretted it.
Yeah, put me in that list. Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing you'll notice, once you get across the channel, there's a lot of British drivers that go on holiday to Europe, but they'll be in a right-hand drive car in a country where you drive traditionally on the same side of the road as we do here. So for passing, if they don't have a passenger, it's so hard for them to move out around a vehicle on a secondary road.
Wow. Yeah, I could imagine it probably tough for them to go in areas like France and Germany that drive traditionally like the United States do, and here they are in an opposite situation.
Absolutely.
So you've got your pass at this point. You've had your bike inspected in northern England, and you light out for Dover, England.
Mm-hmm. And I've done it a couple ways. The last trip I dropped down to Kingston upon Hull, which has an overnight ferry to the Netherlands. I was heading to the Netherlands to start out in that trip. It's where my ancestors came from, so I usually try and cut through there. But that'll be an overnight ride, about 7 or 8 hours. So I'll get myself a berth, get some sleep for the night while the ship's moving across the channel. But if you go to Dover, you can sit on the ferry, and as you depart, you can actually see France from the bow of the boat. It's not that far. It takes about as much time to load and unload as it does to make the crossing. So this time I just went straight there because I can get there maybe in an easy full day, but I only had a half day riding after the MOT inspection. So I camped that night in Cambridge near the Duxford Air Museum, which if anybody gets there, I highly recommend the Duxford Air Museum if you get a chance.
Very cool. That's an old military base, perhaps,
It's very near the cemetery for the 8th Air Force near Cambridge University, but it is an old air base. But their collection, particularly of World War II vintage aircraft, is phenomenal. You can tour the workshop. So if you're followers of the mechanical lifestyle, there's nothing like standing there and staring at a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. Some of them with actual flak holes in the side of them, but they round them up for parts. You can watch them fabricate aircrafts, rebuilding aircraft. It's an incredible. I live 30, 40 minutes from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and it's every bit as good as that. In some ways, I think better. So if you're anywhere near London, take the train out and go see it.
Very cool. That's a nice tip for all you travelers out there. And Tom, you took a lot of photos on this trip. Why don't you tell some of the listeners where they can find some of those photos of your journey? Okay.
At this point in time, I've got, and if you can't find these, you can email me at Burklow, Burklow, the number 1, Burklow1 at AOL.com. There's a blog I frequent a lot because it's next on my hit list called RideTheRock.com, all one word, RideTheRock.com. And it's for riding in Newfoundland, so that's next on my list to do when I get a chance. But if you go there and just put in the search box Europe, it'll pop right up, and I'll send that to you also, Rich. Well, I think I already did send that to you. If anybody would like that, maybe we can get it posted somewhere and something like that. But I've got about a 3-page blog breakdown there of the trip with pictures, and just kind of an overview of like some things we've talked about, the MOT, the ferry ride. There's some things there on packing and planning. I think the thing that's probably more different than people realize when you're doing it by motorcycle is you're limited on space. So a lot of times I use backpacking or those concepts for packing because it's about space, it's about weight, it's about functionality. So there's some things on there about how I do that also.
Very cool. And I know that pack is your hotel for the night that you bring along with you. You're sleeping in a tent. So that's a very unique way to travel through Europe. And I'm sure that it would appeal to a lot of the adventurers that listen to this show and may want to find some tips on how to do just that.
Well, the thing that part of it, budget always dictates it, but the spin-off of this, and this is the part sometimes people don't think about it. If you want to meet people on a trip, I don't know why you travel if you're going to try and just travel and not meet people, but when you stay even if it's a Zimmer or a motel or something like that, you go to your room at night, you shut your door, your day's over. But when you're camping, when I stayed at the place in Switzerland, there were probably half as many people in the campground on bicycles with their kids, young people that were bicycling the Alps. The guy next to me was a German from Australia who had flown his Harley back to tour around Europe. He was traveling with his jacket, and that was about it. That was his camping facility for the night, was the picnic table. I felt kind of wimpy sleeping in a tent with a sleeping bag on a 55-degree night while he laid on the picnic table. But as he said, he wouldn't have it any other way. So it's an excellent way to open doors to meet people. Like you say, it's a bit of a community. Camping's the same way. The other thing is, in Switzerland, even in the off season, I was in a ski town for a couple of days. Even in the off season, a night's lodging in a nice place, but nothing fancy, was about $100 a night. And I was camping for about 10, 15 Swiss francs a night. So, it does save you some money here and there. And the other thing is, you get minimal stuff. I've got a downfill bag, which compresses down to about half the size of a soccer ball. Eureka 2-man tent. Everything fits into a bag that's probably about 8 inches in diameter and about the width of the back of the bike with saddlebags. About the length of the poles, probably 24 inches. And the tedious part is if you're going to move every night, I factor in about 45 minutes of packing every morning to get it done right. I can have tent set up in about 10 minutes. So if the rain's coming, I've got that down to a science too. But the key thing is it really gets you to places of beauty that you can stay away from the cities. It's not unusual. You see it a lot on the Ride the Rock site. They talk about, camping off the main road, and that just finding rural places and throwing a tent out. You have to be courteous at the same time, but a lot of times you can find a farmer say, yeah, just throw your tent out over there, and that's fine. So it gives you an option. If you just end up someplace you can't find accommodations, there you go. You got a backup plan.
That's very cool, and of course it affords you the opportunity as well, as if you are wanting to go into the main cities like Paris, for example, and you're on the outskirts, you can do that in the morning or, after you get up from your stay overnight in the country, so to speak, and then you're in the city within a short amount of time. So, yeah, that is a cool way to also save money and, get in touch with the beautier parts of a certain country. I know I've been to Paris a few times, but I've never actually ventured too far outside of Central Paris, and even though Central Paris itself is beautiful, I know the surrounding area is as well. But you took the Dover shuttle across the channel there, and there's another way you can also go underneath the channel, and why don't you talk about that? That would accommodate motorcycles as well.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I bumped my button on my headsets here. Sorry about that.
No problem. I thought I lost you. I was like, I thought I lost him.
Yeah, he used the channel. I asked him about that, and he said, yeah, it was more pricey, but it was on his list of things he wanted to do. But he said basically the train cars, or you ride onto the platform almost at a side approach, pull into the car. He said we put the bike on the side stand, stayed with the bike, and you basically go from Dover to just on the other side. It's technically not called Calais. It's a real small station out in the country. I've gotten there a few times. It was just something he chose to do. I'm not sure how far you can take it. I know you have to load up near Dover, but where you can get off in France, I'm not sure if you're forced off at the Calais, vehicle depot or whether you can take it farther in. I'm thinking you have to get off there. I've never done it with a bike. I've always found something, I don't know, I just always enjoy arriving by boat maybe. But as a passenger, I have done the channel a couple times. It's a great way to go. It's just, you wouldn't believe you're going as fast as you do, so.
Yeah, it's almost like being on a jet airliner. You just sort of sit back and watch the countryside disappear.
Oh, yes.
Of course, yes. Very awesome. So tell us about once you got into France, you were disembarked from the craft, and then you made your way into France. What was your first impressions of the countryside?
I've been there several times. The thing that I noticed this time, we think of America being the breadbasket of the world, but the northern part of France, let's say between Calais, staying north of Paris, heading towards Germany, is just, as far as the eye can see, enormous wheat farms, just unbelievable in size. I mean, grain silos that are 10 stories, 15 stories, and just endless. Now, makes for some pretty boring riding. But at the same time, it's one of those things that, everybody should ride across Kansas once. It helps you understand the size of the world and where you fit into it, I think. And it's toll roads. The other thing that a lot of people don't realize is the main motorways in France are toll roads. And it doesn't necessarily have a flat rate. My impression was, as I was riding and plenty of time to think, riding through the wheat fields, is it seems to be the stretch of road you're on. If it's a more popular, well-traveled road, it's going to be a higher toll per mile. I'd say I probably easily tossed $200 in tolls out going across and back across France.
Wow, that's amazing.
And my theory was, if I'm paying, I can go as fast as I want to go. And that seemed to be the understanding. So.
That's pretty interesting. That's a something that you wouldn't necessarily expect. I know here in the States, there's always a way around a toll road. But as you're saying, most of the time probably in France, not so, maybe.
Well, I mean, there's nice secondary roads, don't get me wrong. The problem is you're near the coast, Normandy and maybe heading from Calais inland, the small cities, however scenic, at some point you say, well, I've got to make some time. And that's the tricky part. When I came back, coming out of Switzerland near Geneva, I did stick to the secondary roads for about the first third of the trip. And you're out in the country there, it's more wide open, so you can make some time. And then eventually, as I got near Paris, I jumped on the motorway and started throwing coins at the machines again, so.
That sounds like an awesome trip. So your trip then went from France into Germany?
Yes, my first stop, really, I was going to stop at the town of Verdun. My grandfather on my mother's side had served in World War I there, and I had his diary. So I saw it as a great opportunity. I could document to the day and the location exactly where he was. So I'd always wanted to see some of the World War I sites there. So I spent 2 nights there at a campground that had its own bistro, its own wine list, Wi-Fi, for about $10 a night. So, the camping's not as rough as they might want to paint the image.
Yeah, that sounds like a fine place to stay, no doubt.
And camping in Europe often is a very different experience than it is here. Often families go to a campground with the idea that it's going to be a weekend away. So it's not so primitive as it is here. I mean, the restaurant, at the little campground there in Verdun had fresh local produce, outstanding food. Like I said, they had Wi-Fi. I traveled with an iPad this time. They had a bar, excellent restroom facilities. So aside from sleeping in a sleeping bag, I've stayed in motels that weren't that nice. So the next night I headed over to Heidelberg, where I was meeting up with some coworkers, that were traveling with some high school kids on a European trip. So spent the night in Heidelberg, which is an excellent town if anybody can stop by there. Great university, good medieval town, and, spent the night there, first night in Germany.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know we have a good friend of mine from YouTube. His name is Guido, also known as the Getawayer. A lot of the people that listen to this show are familiar with him, but if you have a chance, check out his videos on YouTube. He's called the Getawayer, and he makes some high-end vehicle videos. He takes test rides of them and lets you know his feelings about them. He wanted to join us on the show today and talk a little bit to you, Tom, because he's from Germany, but he had some work obligations, so he couldn't join us. But I wanted to give a tip of the hat to the Getawayer out there from Germany. He's a good friend, and he's a longtime listener to the show.
Speaking of Germany there in the first stop in Heidelberg, if there's people out there thinking about doing this is a good chance maybe to talk some logistics. The bike I have is registered as a British motor vehicle. Of course, I live in the United States, so I have to insure the vehicle. Now, the tricky thing is, well, not tricky, you can't insure it with your local insurance agent here in the States. So you buy what they call green card insurance. And basically all it is, it's a European thing where if you're going to drive in a country that you're not a resident of, you need to have this green card. It's literally a green card. If you're in Britain and you want to travel into Europe, you'll need to have the green card, but it's pretty commonplace there. So in the past, I'd gone through an underwriter in Great Britain, and this time they couldn't help me. They said their underwriter couldn't write insurance in Britain because the bike was registered there. They can only write it for where the bike or vehicle is not registered. So I went to sort of my backup guy I've followed him for years, Knopf Tours, Knoph. They have a website. If you use Google Knopf Tours, it'll pop right up. And he writes green card insurance. And he took care of me as fast as you could snap a finger. I explained to him, I don't live there. The bike's there. He said, no problem. In typical German, he got it handled. And I think for the 3 weeks, insurance was about $150 for liability to the European Union standard. And he also does rentals. If you want to ship your bike, you can ship it to Knopf Tours. They'll set it up for you. His name is Stefan. They'll set it up for you. You can leave one there and just store it and have it prepped for you when you go back, which I've known some people to do that. They'll buy a used bike, ship it, and leave it there in storage, and then pull it out. You're right in the heart of Europe. So you're always looking for a connection point like Stefan Knopf, or there's a lot of dealers. Motorcycle dealers do long-term storage and prep for people that want to leave a bike over there for a while. So that's always an option. You got to have that insurance. So anyway, after Heidelberg, I headed south for Switzerland.
And I saw recently on a program here in the U.S. on one of the HD channels, a program about the Alps. And I'll tell you, after seeing that program, I think that's on my bucket list now.
Yes, I had been to the Alps in a car trip. I take that back. My very first trip, I went just to the edge of the Alps, a little town called Lauterbrunnen south of Interlaken. But I didn't really ride, but maybe one pass coming out of Zurich into it. And there's a book. Hold on just a second. I'll round it up here. It's by a guy named Herman. And what it is, he's put together sort of a bucket list of Alps. The passes, and he breaks them down. It's called the Alps, second edition. It's by John Herman, very well-known book. And the nice thing about it, he breaks down each pass. He rates the pass. He tells you where services are, what you want to see, what you should notice, why you might pick this pass versus the others. And so that was my Bible for this trip. I did a lot of research ahead of time and tried to plan a route where I could get. Because if you think about the Alps, the passes will go all the way from France, all the way into Austria, Eastern Europe, and Northern Italy. You're still in the Alps, you're still riding passes. So I kind of set up a base of operation in the middle of Switzerland called Andermatt, about an hour from Italy, an hour from central Switzerland, and so on, and then threw up the tent and did some day rides.
Wow, that's awesome. And of course, right now as you're talking, I have a video or a picture on the screen of you in the Alps there, and just awesome country. It's just the view is stunning. Yeah,
I mean they go to a lot of trouble to build a road in the Alps. I mean the Swiss are just fanatical about quality, whether it be green quality in terms of recycling, damage to the environment. And as you ride these passes, I started noticing I'm an off-roader too, and I started noticing these smaller paths. And as I talked to a local, they said, used to be it was a goat trail. Then they paved it and then they started putting horses on it. Then they paved it for cars, and eventually they upgraded to the road that you travel on now. But those all have to come up to the same saddle and the same pass to bridge over that. And a lot of times on each side, you'll see a guest house on each upside and downside of the pass, because you would go up, stay there for the night, then push over the next morning if you were herding, or if you're doing it by horse and carriage and so on. And you still get that feel. It's still a pretty rugged place. There was snow on all the passes I went over, even in the middle of July.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, the countryside, and as you said, everything has its own place over there. It seems to me like nothing's out of place. I'm sure in some areas there are, but I mean, you don't see trash generally anywhere.
Oh, you mean they're very conscious about the ecology, and the other thing I think you pick up is they live to live where they live. That might sound a little redundant, but I mean, there was a couple next to me in Andermatt. I'm going to guess they were probably my age, late 40s, early 50s, and they were bicycling from Munich. And I was only an hour's ride from Italy, and they were on their bicycles up and down the passes. There was a couple to the other side of me with two kids, I'm going to guess between 5 and 8 years old, on bicycles hauling their tents up and down the Alps. Day walkers, day hikers, overland hikers. I felt kind of guilty being on a motorcycle at that point. They live, I mean, when you live there, I don't think I'd ever want to be inside. It's just a fantastic place, and they cherish that. They really value, even if you're going to build something in Switzerland, let's say a new building, most town ordinances require you to put up scaffolding that would be the size of this place to show the visual impact, so the community can vote on whether or not you can build it.
Wow, it's amazing.
So we think we have regulations here, but they have a lot to protect there, and I think there's something to what they're doing.
Absolutely. So what was the highlight of your trip through Europe? From the Alps, you went where?
I spent one day and did a 5-pass loop right back to where I started. The idea was I got a place to stay for the night, just go enjoy the day of riding. So I kind of dipped right to the northern edge of Italy, and I did, I think 5 passes, the Furka, the Grimsel, the Susten Pass, and a couple minor passes. saw more glaciers than I ever remember seeing. So just that one day of riding was just, you say, okay, I'm good. I'm done. I can go home now. And then I'd never been to Italy. So then on the exit, after repairing a nail in my tire the next day, I dropped over the pass into, northern Italy near the, Lake Como area. And then, stayed, just hooked right back around into France and stayed near Mont Blanc, in just a beautiful area where, you're in like groves of river birch trees, the French culture. I mean, the thing that every French campground I stayed at, they asked me if I wanted bread. I said, well, yeah, I like bread. They said, no, would you like some here in the morning? And they would go to the local bakery and place the order for the entire campground, whether it be a baguette, a croissant, and they'd have it there for you in the morning for maybe a couple dollars.
Wow.
You know, that's not camping the way I know it. So just experiencing a culture that, you know, friendly, they appreciated where they lived and what they, you know, they valued. They understood that this is a great place to be. So just that, I think that 3 days there in Switzerland, Italy, back into France, it was just something, you know, just right out, you wake up dreaming after that all night. It was just stunning and nothing wrong. Even the flat, the nail in the tire, so what, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
You fix it, you go on and you go ride in Italy. It was just fantastic.
Yeah, that sounds like I was talking to you before the show, like a once-in-a-lifetime trip. But as you said, you've been there several times now. But that's truly an awesome description of your travels in Europe on a motorcycle.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some friends that travel in a much wider range around the world, so it's not like I'm the prolific traveler like a lot of people out there. But, you know, I am just an average guy, and if it's one of those things, if you have that dream, and you think it's unobtainable financially, you might be surprised if you set your priorities, you know, for I want to go. I don't have to stay in 5-star hotels. I can, I usually only eat one big meal a day at a restaurant. Probably the most expensive thing is gas. Gas is stunningly expensive. It costs as much to fill the motorcycle up there more than it does to fill my car up here.
Yeah, that's for sure. That and coffee, of course, in France. Depending on where you buy it, it was probably about $5 a cup. And I used to think people were joking when I'd tell them, yeah, I'm going to France. This was a few years ago. And they, oh, you want the $6 a cup coffee over there? You know, it's not far from that, actually.
Well, you know, if you're in the large, that's the other thing I've noticed, you know, I've been to Paris twice, once with each of my kids. And to me, that's a different trip. You know, you go there for the experience and for the kids and so on. But on these trips, I just tend to steer away from the larger towns. And it's like here, when you go to New York City, it's going to be more expensive than it is in the countryside. So, you know, that's the other side of it, is that, you know, you plan your trip and, you know, there's just so much to see. You don't necessarily have to go to Paris. You don't know. This time I didn't go to London. Usually I swing by London on the exit. I didn't go and I didn't miss it. It's a nice town, but, you know, there's so much more out there in the countryside, I think, to do it on a reasonable budget.
Exactly. And that's what a lot of people are into these days. Well, Tom Burklow, I thank you for joining us today on Car and Truck Talk USA, even though we're talking about Europe today. And my, what a marvelous trip you had, and it's great. And anybody listening to the show, you want to catch up with Tom, check out his pictures. You can go to ridetherock.com. It's one word, ridetherock.com, and search for Europe on there, and you can see Tom's photos on there. It's just an absolutely beautiful looking trip he took across Europe solo on a motorcycle.
Also, if you have wanderlust when you're on Ride the Rock, there's a great collection of ride reports there for Newfoundland, Labrador. You know, it's a great thing to do on a winter day when you can't get out ride. Give a look at what else is there also. And again, Tom's email. Tom, again, your email and where people can contact you for questions. Yes, just send it to Burklow1. That's my last name, Burklow 1 at AOL.com. And I can shoot you the link or, send you some resources. Even if you're just banging the idea around, just drop me an email and I'll be glad to tell you what I can tell you. Pretty cool, Tom. Well, thank you for joining us on today's show, and we hope you come back in the future and tell us more about some motorcycle events, what's happening in your life, and some more trips that you might be taking. That would be great. I'd be glad anytime to do that. All right, Tom Burklow, thanks for joining us, and
We'll talk to you all again on the next edition of Car and Truck Talk USA.
If you have more questions about touring in Europe or other places around the world, just check into www.bikeshareworld.com.
If you'd like to see the video portion of this program, just search carandtrucktalk.com or go to YouTube and search for Car and Truck Talk USA.